So my presentation now is about the EU system and specifically about a study that we conducted in 2022 to understand what has been the impact of the plant variety rights system in the EU economy and environment. Okay, so the EU manages a regional system. Regional system means that we apply plant variety rights on a broader regional territory, which is the European Union, so the 27 member states. Today we have 27 member states. UK left the EU, so is not any longer under the protection. So breeders who want to protect in the UK shall file a national application. That's the principle. We operate the system, we manage the system, we implement the system, and we provide services to breeders and farmers as well to benefit society, as it was underlined also under the UPOF mission. What are the main features of the EU PVP system? So first of all, the system is based on the UPOF 91 Act. European Union has been the first intergovernmental organization joining UPOF in 2005. So our implementing regulations are fully in line with the UPOF Convention 91 Act. We have the basic regulation, which is the fundamental legal act that implements UPOF 91 in the EU legal system, and implementing regulations. And the UPOF Convention, of course, is our reference. I'd like to say that it's the acquis communautaire, is part of the legal sources of EU law. And the member states of the European Union and also individually members to the UPOF Convention. Almost all the UPOF, the member state of the EU are also members to the UPOF Convention. And for the countries that are not members, the EU system applies because European Union law has supremacy on national law and applies directly in the member state legal systems. What is also important to note is that under the TRIPS agreement and Article 27.3, as you may know, parties to the TRIPS agreement have the obligation either to protect plant varieties by patents or by an effective, often this little word is forgotten, effective sui generis system, and I underline again, effective, and or a combination, patents and PVR. In the EU, we have decided to go for plant variety protection, for plant breeders' rights. And we did it in compliance with the UPOF framework. The systems allows a uniform application of the rules, as I said. It's very convenient for breeders because it is managed only by one authority, one application. It's more predictable, the legal certainty is better guaranteed. And we work in close collaboration with technical authorities. So we don't have our own testing facility that belongs to the EU. We work and we rely on the technical facilities of national authorities, the so-called examination offices. So we have a network in all the member states where we rely on the know-how and technical capability of national authorities for each crop species. And where we don't have facility in the EU, we can make agreements with third countries. So if Indonesia would become one day EUPOF member, we could make an agreement with your institute to, for example, conduct the US testing on exotic species we cannot grow in the EU. And this is what we do regularly for crops where we don't have capability in the territory of the EU. So as said before, our network is very comprehensive in the EU. We have 23 DOS examination offices in all the member states. And they are highly specialized per crops. Some of these offices have a competence and have the exclusivity to test crops. In other cases, we have parallel competence. Why? Because you see, European Union is a big territory, and we have to guarantee that under different climatic conditions, you can test, for example, wheat. So you need different locations in the center of Europe and in the south of Europe. And also due to extreme climatic conditions that we are facing and climate change, we need more and more additional testing capabilities. We have seen that yesterday or the day before yesterday, Germany has been completely paralyzed by the snow and the low temperature, so everything was blocked. And also in France, where I live, we have observed -5 up until -10, which is totally exceptional situations. So this is one of the reasons why we need a lot of testing facilities and capabilities in different environmental conditions, in different zones, in different member states. Now, the CPVR, as you know, is a kind of right. So plant breeders' right, we granted it's for a limited period of time in the EU. According to the 91 Act, we grant protection for 25 years or 30 years. 30 years is applicable, for example, to fruits and some other species, and for the rest is 25 years. These varieties do not impact and do not interfere with traditional existing varieties, local varieties, land races, and wild varieties. What we have in the EU is a separate registry for varieties which are not protected. Amateur varieties, traditional varieties that can be used by farmers, by consumers, and that there is a separate regime. So it's clear that they fulfill different objectives and they can be used by farmers. They are not protected by plant breeders' right. They are registered, so we know they exist. We know. And they can be used by farmers and amateur gardeners. So very clear separation of concepts here. There are a number of limitations and exceptions that the EUPOF system allows, such as the private and non-commercial use activity, experimental purposes, and the well-known breeder exemption, which is crucial to allow further progress and innovation in plants, because it allows the use of protected varieties without asking the authorization of the owner of the variety and without having to pay a license fee in order to use the protected varieties. Now, why we did the study? So last year, 2022, we decided, okay, it's almost 30 years that our system is in operation. 30 years, it's a lot of time, and we have never measured what is the impact of this system. So we wanted clearly to establish a methodology in order to try to capture what are the benefits of the system through marketing improved varieties for all the stakeholders of the value chain. We're not talking here only of breeders. And certainly we're not talking here of big corporations alone monopolizing the seed market. So we wanted to look also at farmers and growers and how the system could improve the competitiveness of these actors in the value chain. So one of the most important striking element that came out of the analysis is the fact that in plant innovation and plant breeding, the sector is investing on average 20%, but even more, of the annual turnover in R&D, research and innovation. And this is the highest rate of investment in research and innovation if you compare the same investment that is done in other industries, even pharmaceutical industry and electronic industry. So there is a lot of investment which is by far mostly handled by private companies in making available new varieties to growers and farmers. The study has been conducted in cooperation with the EU IPO and the body of the EU IPO, the observatory. And it was very complex and very difficult to do. Why? Because we had to consider different sectors. We had to consider agriculture on one side, horticulture on another side, and ornamentals, which belong to horticulture. But you can understand that also the business logics behind agriculture crops, arable crops, vegetables, and ornamentals can be very different. So we face the challenge of, okay, how are we going to do here? Because we cannot neglect horticulture crops and just focus on agriculture. So we did it, and we, in essence, without going too much into details, but we have made a selection of species in each crops. Otherwise, it would have become impossible to make a study and to develop a methodology. The study wanted to quantify the economic contribution of the system, and we have seen from different metrics that the system has produced benefits in terms of more ability to feed a growing population, in terms of added value for the economy, and also in terms of fostering higher employment in EU agriculture. This is one of the most critical issues in Europe today, because we have a population of farmers and growers who is aging, and younger people don't want to do farming. So we will face more and more the issue of renovating our farming community. And nowadays, obviously, the model farmer is not any longer somebody who is ignorant or who doesn't know anything. Nowadays, the farmer is somebody who has studied even agronomy, breeding, who can make use of artificial intelligence techniques, drones, etc. So this is, let's say, the next generation of farmers we are trying also to educate. And I can tell you that the Young Farmer Organization in the EU is very keen to get access to good, improved varieties. They are pleading for good, improved varieties, more than you can imagine. So they clearly recognize the benefit of the protecting system. They clearly recognize also the importance of innovation that can be an element to improve employment rates in regions of European countries, especially where we face also the phenomenon of abandoning the territories and the small villages, also in Europe. not only in Asian countries or in other countries on the globe, you face the concentration of big rate of population in big cities. This is also a tendency in Europe, where we have a very extensive network of small towns and villages that risk to die completely, you know? The last point is what I mentioned before, because it's very emblematic. It's very important, I think, also for you to understand that in the EU, so developed economy, the majority of breeders are micro companies, family business that are doing breeding since generations, small and medium-sized companies. 90%, it's a lot. These are official data. These are data coming from the CPVO registry. So more official than that, it's impossible. And that was one of the challenges of the study, to rely on solid, impartial data that we can use to make some conclusions on this. So 90%, and they hold 60% of all the protected varieties. And as we said already before, it's the choice of the breeder to protect or not to protect. And I can say that if you compare, for example, the data of registered varieties for marketing, so the listing system, the so-called listing system, and then depending on the crops, for example, for vegetable varieties, on average, only 30% of all the listed varieties is also protected by plant breeders' right. Pay attention, 30% is not a lot. Many varieties are not protected, are just entered into the market through the registration system. There are many reasons behind this. It depends a lot on the species, and also on the fact that depending on the species, breeders need to breed and to bring quickly on the market new varieties. If you think a tomato, for example, every new tomato variety that entered the marketing system has to get a resistance to certain diseases. Otherwise, you don't get it marketed. So that's a problem that breeders can solve, and that you would not solve with the traditional varieties. Or you may be very attached to traditional variety, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work any longer. So I'm not a technical people, but I was explained that especially for certain sensitive species, you always need to face new pathogens, new diseases for which breeding and resistances as part of the major breeding goal is essential to bring to the market new varieties. The system, we try to quantify somehow also what would be the impact on the environment. And we made some calculations, so our consultants, the experts, try to make some calculations. And the finding is very encouraging and very positive, because it shows through the methodology of the study that the system has contributed, at least contributed, to reduce the annual greenhouse gas on the EU territory. And also there is a positive impact in terms of use of resources, such as water consumption and land. Obviously, what we have to aim today is not only guaranteeing food security as we did after the Second World War in the EU. Today, we have to guarantee continued food security, but under sustainable ways of production. We need to use less land, we need to use less input and less chemicals. And this is a demand also from, not only from the international community, but also from consumers. We all want to eat something which is clean and secure and with less chemicals, but with more nutritious characteristics. This is what we demand as consumers. And obviously, I'm not going to repeat Yolanda's emphasis on the sustainable development goals, but that was also part of the effort behind the study to see how this will support and contribute to the sustainable development goals. I finished this presentation with a couple of success stories in the EU. We have, as I said, a lot of knowledge in the EU, almost in private sector, but not only. Also public institutions and research institutions. One of these institutions is based in Spain. It's called IMIDA. It's an institute not far from Alicante. And they do a lot of research. And some of their research is in the field of grape varieties. Do you know that grape varieties used for wine production are the more affected by certain pathogens? And it's a rather small sector, but with high productivity in the EU for production of wines. And this, there is a high concentration of chemicals and pesticide in the grape sector. So obviously we want to reduce this. We have to reduce this. And one of the tools we have is breeding. One of the tools we have is plant breeding. And plant breeding is going to produce and put at the disposal of wine growers resistant varieties. So how you obtain resistances in varieties through plant breeding, not applying chemicals. This is the answer to these issues. Yes, this institute, as I said, is public funded institute, and they also were able to fund these expensive research programs by making use of European Regional Development Fund. This is an instrument of the EU to support the development of regions. And typically this region is rather in the south of Spain. So they are still eligible to get funding because it's not so developed economically. And you know, the last point is that all the effort they have done in doing research and trying to bring to farmers and growers these resistant varieties took 26 years. It's a lot of time. Can you imagine how fast we have to be in reacting to the challenges we are facing and the time we need, not only to breed a new variety, but also to bring the variety to the market and to get the acceptance of a farmer. Because farmers, they farm with what they know. They don't farm on the basis of a piece of paper. They have to be confident that they can use the variety and that they will not lose their harvest. And that there will be consumers able to buy what they produce. Because at the end of the day, they have to get a return from their activity, which is fundamental. So return on investment, the financial viability of this 27-year-long breeding program was also possible through the protection system. This is a public institute making use of the PVR system, so protecting variety. Another misconception that is very frequent, it's a public body and therefore they should not protect fates. Also because, as you may know, and maybe it was already mentioned by Yolanda, is the breeder who can make and apply conditions and limitations and decide how you want to trade your good. You want to trade it for free? You can. You want to apply some conditions in your license agreement that consider the whole factors of the value chain, that's possible. So public institutes can protect, and they do protect, such as in this case. Another example is another small company. It's called Nova Siri Genetics. This is one of the European small companies I was mentioning. They are specialized in small fruits, strawberries. blueberries, this kind of crops. And I can tell you also that strawberries is among the fruit crops where we have the most of plant breeders' rights. I made a podcast with this company just last week, Friday, before coming here. And I will visit this company next year during the open day. I think we have to tribute importance to these small companies, investing all their resources in doing plant breeding. That's why I always go and I want to see what they do. They face all the challenges we have in agriculture and horticulture. And they base their breeding program in making available to farmers of strawberries, rustic varieties that can well adapt to extreme climatic conditions, which are completely changing in Europe. Strawberries are tested in Portugal, in Germany, in Spain, under different climatic conditions. The varieties that traditionally were grown in areas where strawberry was the major crop are not any longer suitable with traditional varieties. And we are also already now facing a situation whereby, for example, in the south of Italy, traditional crops which were grown since centuries are not any longer suitable. You may know that in Italy, for example, in the south and in the south of Spain, in the region of Malaga, you will see more and more avocado, for example. And we even test these crops in the south of Spain, because nowadays the climatic condition is so changing that we can do that. So strawberry are extremely important, and the toolbox of technologies implemented by a small breeding company can go from molecular markers to so-called new genomic technique to traditional conventional breeding methods, crossing and selection, which is always there. Don't think that because we are in the era of new technologies, breeders are not crossing and selecting. They are doing that as the basis of every breeding program. But people think that it's only new technology. No, it's crossing and selecting as Mendel taught us to do, right? It's the basic of every breeding program. And new technologies can speed up certain processes, of course. And there is nothing bad in that. Absolutely nothing bad. So, very innovative company, small company, they protect all the varieties they breed. They have testing facilities all over Europe. They have a lot of cooperation also with Maghreb countries, in Morocco, in north of Africa, where they see the potential for growing new adaptive varieties. And obviously, they use the CPVR system as a tool to license and to enter into a cooperation agreement also with research institutes. Thank you very much.